Parents, I'm super excited to introduce you to today's guest, who is Paulita Pappel. She's been working in the porn and film industry as a director, performer, producer, and intimacy coordinator for over 10 years. She is passionate about filmmaking and feminism, and she aims to convey this message by bringing focused attention to the consumer about consent, negotiations, and boundaries within porn, as well as mainstream sex and nudity scenes. She actively educates through her platforms about the process of what's happening behind the scenes of sexually implicit as well as explicit content in order to help adults understand their individual relationship to porn. So now you're probably wondering, why am I inviting her on my video podcast when my channel is all about helping parents to have the sex talks? Well, many adults, including parents, have a lot of preconceived ideas about porn. And the vast majority of current parents never had proper sex education about porn, whether it was in school or from their own parents. I asked Paulita how parents can develop their own opinions and ideas about porn. Is it hypocritical for parents to watch porn but tell their teen not to? Is human sex trafficking rampant in the porn industry? What is ethical porn, and should we be explaining it during the porn talk? And what goes on behind the scenes of porn that the viewer never sees? I really enjoyed getting Paulita's inside perspective on a lot of topics, and so the interview did go over a little bit of our 20-minute time limit, but I think you will find it to be very interesting. So without further ado, please meet Paulita Pappel. Hi, Paulita. I am super grateful to be speaking with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Cool. So for a lot of my followers, this will probably be the first time that they hear about the profession of intimacy coordinator. And I think they're going to learn a lot from you in these next 20 minutes. So really excited. Because a lot of my parents that I work with, they've never had proper sex education, let alone porn literacy or general education about porn. So let's start there. What would you advise parents to do in order to build out their own education and understanding around porn literacy?
So I think first thing is try to have an open mind and maybe try to question all of the beliefs and prejudices that one have against porn. I think that would be like step number one that I would recommend. I think there are not that many porn literacy resources out there. This is something that I've been searching in the last years. We actually, from last year, we decided to offer an online course that we've called How to Watch Porn.
Which I love, by the way. I've done your course.
Thank you. Oh my God.
I will link that in. Yeah, I'm going to totally link that in the description because I think it's a fantastic course. Go ahead. Tell more about it. Definitely.
Thank you so much. I'm happy you liked it. It came out of the need of being like, people asking me like, where can I learn more about this? And I'm like, well, I don't know. There's not that many things out there. If you go to any like educational platform and you search for porn, you'll find a lot of like how to quit porn, how to quit masturbating, but not so much on like how to have a healthy relationship to porn. However, how much you look at it doesn't matter. Like, how do you deal with it in a way that is healthy and it's based on like actually scientific facts and so on and so forth. So we did this course with that in mind. It's basically explaining the basics on like, what happens on set, the diversity of porn, and trying to give advice on how to develop a known healthy sexual care routine with porn.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic course. And I think what you're getting at here is there's a lot of opinions around porn and the acceptability of it in our society by a variety of groups. So I'll have parents who reach out to me and be like, oh my gosh, Kathleen, so I just saw in the browser history, my preteen was looking at porn, and I don't want them to be watching porn because the people in porn, the women in porn, they'll say, are victims of human sex trafficking, and they'll just stop the conversation right there. And so I'll educate them. But I want to ask you, how do we have a conversation about porn and human sex trafficking that doesn't take away from the seriousness of image-based sexual abuse? And is human sex trafficking rampant in the porn industry? So, yeah.
I think it's so important that we talk about this because it is a very widespread misinformation that the porn industry is full of, sex trafficked people. And it's crucial that we understand that is not the case. I think we need to establish porn as something that we define as an image that is being shot consensually with all participants, and it's being published consensually, like with the consent of everyone involved, right? And obviously, I mean, I think this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, obviously involving only informed consenting adults.
Of course.
Now,
Yeah.
I think anything else that goes away from that definition, if there are any of those factors are not there, if they're not adults, for example, clearly, but if there's no consent and there has not been like clear, defined, transparent conversations around what or information about what was going on, that is not porn anymore. Those are crimes, and crimes should be persecuted and punished. But in order for us to define what a crime is, we need to also separate it clearly from how we define porn. And I think the majority, like if we're talking about the porn industry, the mainstream porn industry, both in the US and in Europe, this is an industry. There are contracts, there are many rules. Everyone's IDs are getting checked. People are being informed of what they're doing. Sure, there are maybe more or less nice people in the industry. I'm not gonna pretend it's a wonderful, magical place. No industry is. Obviously, the porn industry is no better than any other industry, and there are going to be bad players and people, misusing their power and so on and so forth. However, we do need to make a very clear distinction between, people being, I'm going to say assholes, sorry, and people being criminals. Like that is two different things.
The parents I talk to, and when they start to hear about this, they're saying like, every woman in porn is trafficked. They don't want to be there. And I try to educate and have conversations with them that sex work is a profession, and it is, we can't say that every person clumping, right? We have to say that there is this profession and people do engage in it. And so then they'll ask me, well, then how do I know the porn is ethical, right? So how does someone know that the porn they're consuming is ethical porn and it's not using trafficked individuals?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the first and most easiest rules to try and start, creating a healthy and ethical porn consumption, like for the people watching, is start paying for porn. So, any entertaining product costs money to make, and therefore it should cost money to enjoy that entertainment, because otherwise, if there's no money coming in, then there will be no money to move forward and keep on producing that product, right? So the moment you're consuming porn on platforms that are not the platforms that porn was meant to be, it was not the platform where the creators of that porn, might it be like content creators on their own shooting themselves, or like big production companies. If you're consuming that porn in file sharing platforms, where it's not clear who are the people behind this, you're not doing it ethically. Most likely this is piracy, which is not only, it's bad to pirate like a movie from Warner, right? But I feel it's even worse to pirate like a film made by an individual, and a content creator, because you're not only pirating that film, you are also kind of damaging the sexual autonomy of that person who decided to make that film and decided to sell it, but they didn't want you to watch it for free. See what I mean? So I think that is something like when people are thinking about ethical porn consumption, they're thinking about, how do I find porn that has no sex trafficked people in it? And I'm like, oh, that's really easy. What's maybe not so easy for you to be like, take your responsibility that you are not being the person crossing somebody's boundaries by watching porn outside of the dedicated platforms. So long story short, what I'm saying is there is a lot of porn, like most of the porn out there that has been produced, again, either by a porn production or content creators. These are consenting adults. It's very easy to check them out. If you're gonna, just paying for them on the dedicated platforms, that's already like a very safe bet, like 99%, you're good. But if you want to dig a little bit deeper, it's not even that hard. You can go on the About Us sections of the platforms. There's often behind the scenes material you can check. You can go online on social media and check for the performers. Like nowadays, almost every performer has a Twitter, has an Instagram. You can see how they are talking about their work. You can see how they are talking about maybe they work with other production companies. So I think it's very, very easy to get like yourself informed, to see like who is behind the porn that I'm producing, and are they all, are they putting standards on place that provide for a safe working environment?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's really good. I think there's, I have parents on both ends of the spectrum. So, some saying, okay, well, I'm talking to them about porn. I'm making sure that they understand it is not real sex. in the terms of it is performance. They are performing sex on it. And I'm like, that's great. You're doing really good. She's like, and then I'll have parents on the other end being like, I don't want them watching it at all. Right. And I'm like, okay, so let's try and find that balance. And so that's why I do think I'm going to, of course, link to how to watch porn. I think if parents took some time and figured out their values around it, which your, what was it, 8? I can't remember. Was it 8 videos?
It's 8 lessons. Yes.
8 lessons. 8 lessons. If they just took some time to do it, I think they would be able to explain to their kids better their values around it and what they would like their children to do and how to consume it ethically.
I totally agree with you. I think it's so important. Like the point that you're making is like people have such a hard time talking about porn with their kids because they themselves are not sure what they think, right?
Exactly.
Like, maybe you need to figure out like what is your relationship to porn first, and then you can have a conversation with your kids about it, right? But the moment if you're not even clear, like what do I think? Maybe you don't ever watch porn. Maybe you're scared of porn. Maybe you're watching it but you don't feel good about it, or about the amount or the kind of porn that you're watching. I think like informing yourself and figuring it out for yourself how to deal with that, how to feel good and no shame and no fear around it, it's going to help you then find out a way of speaking to your children in a way that it's age appropriate, obviously, for them.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my whole platform for parents is to have these conversations in an age appropriate and medically accurate way. And I think when it comes to porn, unlike, talking about where babies come from or things like that, but porn specifically, there is so many values that are associated with it that are coming from this shame, guilt avenue that parents have to unpack themselves before they can have a conversation. So absolutely. I can't recommend that enough. So I'll definitely link that. Now, let's talk about intimacy coordination and as a coordinator. So you are probably more versed on the nuance of consent when it comes to sexual activity than the average person. So like you discuss informed consent, ongoing consent, agreements for the scenes, expectations, et cetera, et cetera. Can you share and give some personal insight into what this entails as an intimacy coordinator and what goes on behind the scenes that the viewer never sees watching a sex scene, whether it's in porn or mainstream films?
Yeah, thank you for asking because I love being an intimacy coordinator. When I first heard about the word, and then I understood what this position was, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense, And obviously, this is something that I've been working with mainstream, like non-pornographic non-pornographic films and porn films for like over 10 years. And also in the mainstream films that I've done, there was sexuality was a topic in those films, even though there were no non-explicit sex scenes in them. And just like having these conversations, it's something that I had been doing without naming it intimacy coordination, because I didn't know that name. But it was something that I was very much aware of, and that I had been working on techniques and like optimizing the way I was doing these talks and so on for a long time. And then I heard, oh, someone like figured it out to make it a position officially. I was like, yes, this makes so much sense. And yeah, the basics of intimacy coordination. I mean, I have to say obviously, there's a big difference when you're staging a simulated sex scene or an explicit sex scene. Obviously, there's stuff that you need to know to be able to provide for a safe working environment for those two different scenarios. But the basics of it's kind of similar. It's, as you were saying, it's consent. It's creating a space before the shooting where you have conversations with everyone involved, being aware of the power dynamics that exists on shoots, being aware that performers might not be able to speak as freely as they would when the director is there. And this goes for both porn and mainstream sets. And just making sure that you're giving everyone enough information and a language to discuss everything that needs to be discussed. Because a lot of times what you encounter, specifically in mainstream sets, is people that are not used to talk about sex in a professional environment. And they're just like, they just want to be done with it. Like, yeah, okay, we'll figure. And I'm like, no, actually, we do need to talk about, like, are we going to do this position or not? So yeah, it's really a lot of talking, enabling people to talk to each other, to communicate with themselves and then with the others. And then, of course, for porn, like making very clear, making very clear where are the boundaries, where's the expectations of this shoot, And how are we going to go about it? How is the communication on set going to be? Are we using safe words? And so on and so forth. Because people have very misleading ideas of what happens in porn. Maybe I'll focus on that now.
Yeah, that's fine.
The way I do nowadays intimacy coordination is I send my performers a very long list in advance, listing everything from kissing to triple anal. And they can tell me how much experience they have with it and how much would they like to do this in the context of a shoot. So in this way, I'm seeing okay, because some people will be like, oh, I would love to do bondage, but their experience is 1 out of 5. And then they want to do this in the context of a gangbang. And I'm like, this might be too much,
Okay.
So I try to understand where these people at and what's their desires and their experience and how can I create a safe environment for them. So after having all of this list, and this list is obviously not a contract. It's not oh, you said you're going to do anal, gotta do anal now. It's no, this is giving us all an idea of what you're into, what your boundaries, what your preferences, in order to find a good constellation of people that work together with you, if it's a couple or if it's I shoot a lot of group scenes. That's why I'm it's harder when you're having more people. You need to make sure that everyone is gonna get along. And then on that base, we have a conversation on set. And this is something, well, no, sorry. First, I have my, because I'm often directing, if I'm directing, I have an intimacy coordinator having calls with all the performers, again, power dynamics, so they can tell her, everything they need, their wishes, their fears, so she can in advance make sure that everything's going to be there for them on set. And then this is something that happens on every porn set. There is a talk before the sex scene where people are okay, what are we going to do? Again, these are my boundaries. This is how I try to make an emphasis on how are we feeling today, because how you feel and the things that you want to do sexually might vary depending on the day, depending on the people in front of you. So you might be oh, I love spanking, but then maybe today you have a sensitive bum and you don't feel like spanking. You know what I mean? So making sure okay, how are we feeling today? How are we feeling in this constellation, in this situation? And how are we going to communicate to each other? And how are we going to go into this scene? So really clarifying everything and giving people a language and a communication basis in order for them to keep on communicating throughout the process of shooting. And this goes again for both porn and mainstream film, because it's about being present in your body. And only when you're present in your body and you're feeling yourself and you keep an ongoing, transparent communication, can you make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. And that's what intimacy coordinators are providing, right? The tools for people to take care of themselves. And you can only do that if you are, if you're enabled to do so. And if you're present in your body. The moment you are having a bad situation and you're kind of fleeing and being okay, I'm just going to go through this, that's not a good space for you to make yourself vulnerable in that kind of situation.
Right. Yeah, because I think for young adolescents who would see porn, right, they come across it in a unintended way, and they see it and they think, oh my gosh, that's what if I have sex, that's what I'm going to do, or that's what everybody does. And they don't have this understanding that there's been so much communication. There's been actually pauses and check-ins and all of this. And if we're not actually explicitly saying this to kids in a porn literacy environment where they can learn this, then right, they're just going to see that and think, okay, that's what sex is, right? And so it comes back to the education. I have to ask you a question. Would you say there's more talking and communication in porn than actual sex?
100%.
You know
no what?
way.
No, 100%. I think every person in that comes to my sets, I have journalists or people that are oh, I want to see how your set is and so on. Every time they come and they observe all the communication that is going on set, afterwards they always tell me oh my God, we need to be doing this on our private lives. They're fascinated. They're wow, this was so enriching for me to see how much and how sexy and how easy, that's because when people think about talking about sex in private life, they're oh, that sounds, kills the magic, and that sounds weird. And I'm no, that's just because you don't know how to be honest. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not saying, everyone is different and everyone should do whatever they want, but I'm saying I wish everyone would have the tools in case they want to have conversations around sex and the things they like and dislike, because it's really creating it's creating intimacy, and it's gonna give you a better sex life at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I mean, but no, you kind of see it perpetuated in films, and I mean, I grew up seeing films and somebody would be like, okay, don't lick my ear, don't lick my ear, and then they don't say don't lick my ear, they just kind of keep pushing them or nudging them or changing, and they never say, and then all of a sudden it like they stop and they get up and they move and they're like, okay, what just happened, right? And so you're right, it does come down to communication, and yeah, okay,
And
very cool.
and I think it's so important what you're saying, the films, like mainstream. So we're saying like, okay, kids watch porn and they might, if nobody has told them this is a fantasy, this is a performance, what you're seeing is not literally what you will be experiencing possibly
Right.
in your life, and so on and so forth, they might get the wrong ideas. So number one, we need to explain them that, of course, as you're saying. But also number two, like what are other sources where we learn about sex? That you're saying there is sex scenes, simulated sex scenes in films, and these films are even, I think they have even more potential to be misunderstood or like to give the wrong ideas, because at least in porn, I think adolescents, they know that porn is a performance. At some point, like, somebody has told them, or they understand this is not one-to-one. But when you're watching a film, you're really like going into this world that is representing your world, and you're getting a lot of messages. And the messages that we've been becoming from mainstream films around sex is exactly what you were describing. There's no communication. There's like all the romantic comedies have these funny, quote unquote funny situations when something is going wrong, but they never talk about it. Yeah, they're trying always to like sneakily get out of it without, because there is shame. These are really bad values, and I think we need to be also reflecting on like what are children and teenagers learning about sex from these films, and why do we need to also be talking to them about what they're watching in these films and giving them other resources to learn like how sex can be.
Yes. I mean, I completely agree. I think parents have to embrace, I call it embracing teachable moments, where you take that opportunity to say, hey, let's pause that, and I want to tell you something. And it doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be a drawn out 5-minute conversation. It's just what you're seeing in that is unacceptable. They never checked in, they never asked each other, and therefore they're going to have miscommunication. We're going to see that play out in the rest of this movie, but it could have been avoided if they just would have been honest with each other, right? So
I love it. I remember, this is so random, but I remember once when I was watching a film with my mom and there was someone jumping out of a window, and my mom literally stopped the film and was like, look, you see how this is made? We have a camera here. This person is watching, like jumping out of a window. They're falling on a mattress. And then we have another camera thing here where this is a dummy. This is not a person. This is this whatever. And I was like, it's so funny. This has nothing to do with sex, but I remember up to today that moment so clearly in my mind. And I love that you're calling them like, what do you say, teachable moments?
Teachable moments. Yeah, I call them teachable moments.
I love it because I do think those can have such a great impact in a child, because you're like, suddenly understanding something, like, oh, this is a performer. Oh, this is camera work. Oh, this is, and that sticks to you, and it's gonna help you understand the world so much better.
I think we're getting a glimpse into where you started getting your interest in filmmaking, was your mom stopping and telling you how they ran that scene. That's super cool.
Yeah,
So yeah,
totally.
my mom would stop things, and especially violent scenes. My mom would stop and she would actually say, "This is TV magic. I want you to know that this is TV magic. If there was a real gun, and my mom was very, very particular about teaching me about violence. Not so much sex, but violence, definitely. I remember those.
Well, they're both important, right?
Very important, very important. Okay, well, no, that's really awesome. I know my kids will turn 18 one day and they will have access to, everything, including porn if they want to view it. But I've had parents tell me in consultations, they'll say, you know what, I do not want my kid to ever watch porn because it's just overstimulating. It's going to mess them up. They're going to not be able to control themselves. They're going to maybe become addicted to it. They go into all of these things. But they'll say, and then I'll be like, okay, so have you watched porn? They'll be like, yeah, I've watched porn. And so then I'll be like, okay, so I'm just going to ask you before I give my opinion, because everybody's heard my opinion on this channel. would you say this is hypocritical, or does this go back to an all-around lack of porn education?
I'd say both. I'd say they're linked to this hypocrisy is linked to each other. It's systemic, I would say. The way as a society relate that the way that we relate to porn as a society is highly hypocritical, and it has been since centuries. The whole taboo and stigma and shame surrounding sexuality in general, but specifically the depiction of explicit sexuality, aka porn. It's been a tool of power and controlling people, I believe. And I'm not going to go, because we don't have so much time, and I'm not going to go deep into like Catholicism and guilt and so on, which is a topic I love. But just like generally speaking, I think we need to understand, or we need to be aware of the fact of how much we're influenced by these like sexual morals that should be outdated, that are outdated in a lot of fields. But with pornography, it seems like we're still clinging to certain stuff that, in other areas we would be like, oh, come on, this is, we're in the 21st century now. So I don't want to be harsh with people. I'd say I understand where people are coming from when people are saying, I don't want my kid to watch porn because of these reasons that you listed. I mean, they mean well, right? They want their kid to thrive. They want their kid to have a happy sexual life. And they're scared that porn is going to harm them. And I think these fears, they're so deep ingrained that it just takes a lot of deep work to unpack them. So, I don't want to shame parents more and being like, no, this is really hypocritical. This is wrong what you're doing. I'm like, I understand where you're coming from. It makes sense. But I would encourage them to like question that and see beyond it. And I think, I think up to a certain age, it's absolutely like, I would agree that, I think we all agree, like there are certain images that are not age appropriate for certain kids. And, up to 9, 10, 11 years old, I think it's very important that every parent has a parent filter on their children's devices and control what children have access to and what not. I think that is, the same way that parents, will put certain like alcohol and whatever out of the reach of a kid, in a higher place. The same way you need to make sure that your kid is not encountering, as you were saying, like unintentionally certain contents that they're not going to be able to understand, and that is going to be confusing for them. If you want to keep on doing that until they're 18, that's, I don't know about that, but up for them. But I think like I think parents need to understand that the worst, if they're scared about their children having a negative impact from porn, I would say the worst and like scientifically proven worst impact that a child can have in relation to porn is feeling ashamed of it and not getting the proper education in order to understand and process porn. So that's what I would give them. Like, if you're not talking to your children about it, if you're not letting them take their own informed decisions, you're harming them more than you could ever possibly do with them watching whatever.
Yeah, I do encourage parents to have a porn talk, to explain what sexually explicit content is before their kid will unintentionally view it. And most kids, the average age is 12 years old, but of course that's an average. And so that means there's some that are a little bit later and there's some that are a little bit younger. And so I highly encourage parents to explain, hey, you might come across this, and I want you to know what that is. And I want you to know that you should come to me if you see it, and so we can talk about it, because it's not intended for children. It's intended for adults. And then you can have a conversation about, when is it that you want them to see it? We have to approach it in a way that doesn't put shame, but says, this is something that is there. It is meant for adults, and it's called adult entertainment. And this is why it's made. These are the people who make it. This is why people watch it. And it's not intended for you. And these are the reasons why right now. But when you get older, and then you have your values, right? So you have to know what your values are in order to explain it. So I think we're on the same page here. It needs to be around education for the parents as well as children. Totally.
100%. And there's a lack of both. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you, Paulita. I absolutely, I love talking to you, and I cannot wait for everyone to see this video. I hope they really go to your website. I have linked everything below to your Lustry and Hard Work, which is a explicit porn website. And Lustry is the place that does have the link to the how to watch porn learning tools, as well as your Instagram handle and your website to find out more about you. Is there anything else you'd like to share or leave the parents with a message or anything about yourself? You can do that now.
I think I absolutely loved our conversation. I think it's so important that we keep having these conversations, and the more people learn about this, I think the happier and healthier we will all be. I think my message maybe it's like keep curious, and there is, I've been saying like there's a lack of information and resources out there, and that is true, I think. But I also want to end on a positive note and say there are a lot of people, of sex educators, of sex workers, of porn performers, posting a lot of information also, and mostly often they're shadow banned, which is a problem, and so on and so forth. But I want to encourage everyone to seek information from the source, which are again sex educators, sex workers, porn performers, and like you and me.
Yes,
basically.
yes. Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I greatly appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your time with me today, and everybody watching.
Thank you so much.
All right.